Hello and welcome to Critical Hits Month-a-zaki. I'm Matthew.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm David.
Today we're talking about Howl's Moving Castle, which is a story about a young girl, Sophie, who meets a wizard named Howl. And through their encounter, she's cursed by Howl's enemy, the Witch of the Waste, and is turned into an old woman. She then seeks out help and encounters Howl again, and the two of them, through the course of their adventure, learn to undo each other's curses. So for Sophie, undoing her old age, and for Howl, figuring out how to regain his humanity, which he's sold to a devil. So for me, this movie, I like it a lot. It's very complicated. It doesn't explain a lot, and you just have to learn to accept that and move on with this one, with much of Miyazaki, actually. But one of the things I do appreciate about this movie a lot is that there aren't any clear-cut villains. You can't just point at someone and say, you're evil. Everybody has, like, a situation and an agenda, which, by the end of the movie, is completely understandable.
And even when the person is in the wrong, you can still feel a sort of sympathy for them.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up how Miyazaki films don't typically have villains, and while that is one thing I really like so much and what makes them so interesting and so unique, at the same time, it can be a bit of a double-edged sword because it sometimes leaves the film lacking a bit of direction. Like, this is actually the one Miyazaki film where, when asked whether or not I like it, I give a somewhat qualified yes, because it took me a while to really sort of plug into what it was going for. I mean, this is the last time I watched it was actually the fourth time I had seen it, and it took me so long to even really figure out what was going on the surface level, much less sort of dive into any deeper meaning. But I think this was really one movie where I had to work to like it. But once I really got into it, yeah, I think it's one of his better films.
It's nice seeing him working with a entirely European setting. Seeing that Europe done in anime and done in very good anime is always really cool.
Well, and that creates an even more interesting contrast with his style, because more Western fiction and European fiction, it tends to be much more good guy, bad guy.
Yeah.
And so for Miyazaki to bring that level of ambiguity to a European setting, it really just makes the project that much more unique.
I think what I like is we were talking about the ambiguity that we see in his villains there. At the same time, these are very, very flawed heroes that he's presenting us with.
Yeah.
And while we're looking at the curses that they have on them, there's also some very strong character flaws that relate to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't get any heroes here who are just perfect. Like, you don't get, like, the Superman-style person who has that good Boy Scout personality who's just flawless, not only, like, with who they are, but what they do. So, like, for example, Sophie, the main protagonist, she's an interesting character because she's so, I would say, self-centered. She's so focused on believing that she's ugly or it isn't deserving of love and stuff like that.
Right, but you're so sympathetic to her at the get-go. You really don't see her initially as this self-centered person.
Well, that was one experience I had where I think in a lot of ways the first time I saw the movie, I didn't even really get her character arc, precisely because she sort of had me fooled, because the idea is she's very self-centered, but she cloaks it under this garb of self-deprecation and humor and humor and sort of hyper humility.
Yeah,
and so it's the kind of thing where it's very interesting because it's a kind of self-centeredness, but it manifests itself so differently than how we usually see it. It's easy to miss, and that's part. I think that's really a big part of her arc and part of the movie.
Yeah, we see her jealousy of her sister and the way that she is very beautiful, and the way all of the guys pay attention to her in a very positive way, and they dote on her, and we just see her take this in a way that she's just really feeling very sorry for herself throughout much of the movie.
Absolutely. It seems like her entire curse is wrapped around that. Throughout the movie, it's quite beautiful, but you can watch as she's an old woman, every now and again she becomes young again. And this is always happening whenever she's not being self-focused. So like when she has her love for Howl, or when she's helping others, or thinking about others, her age starts to disappear and she comes back to the age she truly is. But whenever she remembers that she's ugly or unworthy or old,
or thinks any such
absolutely
thought,
or even thinks that she's cursed, the curse returns. So it's really interesting because she can't fix it on her own, because the more she thinks about it, the more trapped she is.
But when she's caring about another person, kind of getting outside of herself at that point, then she actually is quite beautiful.
It's really, yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing about this is it ties in almost perfectly with Howl's own curse. He made a deal with Calcifer, a fire devil, who basically is giving him more magical powers at the cost of losing his humanity. So he can become this awesome Birdman. But basically, every time he becomes a Birdman, it gets more difficult for him to turn back to human. So we watch as he gets so unloved and so involved with his own fantabulousness that he
He's very
loses
fabulous.
his humanity and has to basically be saved by someone else who also is, in a sense, losing her humanity. She's losing her chance to be human with others, to commune with others.
Well, and Howl, he's very selfish, but he's self-centered in the much more traditional way. I mean, there's this wonderful scene where because Sophie has sort of switched around the potions that he uses, he accidentally dyes his hair the wrong color, and he pretty much just loses the will to live. Because his hair is black instead of blonde, which is a problem that could probably be fixed anyways, and yet he goes into this he's so depressed that he's destroying things around, literally his depression is having a negative effect on the environment around him,
summoning
physically.
the forces of darkness around him.
He's summoning and it works so well because it's so over the top, and yet he's going through the same thing as Sophie is, who is so underplayed.
With that, it's so funny to hear Christian Bale doing those scenes there in the English dub. Just fantastic dubbing actually for these.
Absolutely.
Which is true of most Miyazaki films.
He does the Batman voice, and I'm pretty sure this was before Batman Begins.
Yeah, you see where he got it from.
This is truly where the Batman voice came from.
We have Miyazaki to blame for I'm not wearing hockey pads. So that's good to know.
So both these characters, like I said, they have these curses, and they can't overcome them on their own if they even acknowledge it's a possibility. But what's really interesting is that they both start to learn that together they help each other out. So, for example, at one point, Howl goes off to go fight, and this fight is going to turn him into a monster at this point.
Which just showcases some of Miyazaki's own ideas about war and pacifism.
Oh, absolutely. As war itself dehumanizes this character.
Right.
And almost dehumanizes all the characters that are involved in it. But Sophie's choice... Oh, that's weird. Sophie chooses to pursue... Oh my gosh. Sophie chooses to pursue Howl through the war with the castle to reach him because she knows that she can help him regain his humanity.
Right.
Which he can't do on his own. So it's interesting how these curses are both very... Once again, it's the more individualized they are, the more doomed they are almost. But when they start thinking about others, when they start loving and helping one another, both curses get lifted.
Well, and it's so interesting because there's this one part where it's during when Howl he's sort of partially turned into a bird and he's freaking out, and Sophie's trying to help him and she's saying how she wants to help him be lifted of the curse, and he says you can't even I forget his exact wording.
You can't even lift your own curse.
You can't even lift your own curse, and it's so interesting because he's actually totally missing the point.
Yeah,
and that's so obvious when you look at the film as a whole, because it's really only through sort of taking the focus off of themselves. They have to lift each other's curse before they can lift their own.
Right. It's only when they are loving another person totally without any sort of thought for themselves there.
Yeah.
That their own curse is having and is being negated in any way.
Which is so fascinating when you think about the culture Miyazaki as a storyteller is coming from. With Japan's going through a lot right now, especially in regards to love and caring for others. Everyone's so self-focused on their own achievements, their own goals in their business, that they've decreased in their population. They've had a hard time getting people together. People don't want to fall in love; they're too busy for it. But this movie shows that not only is love good, but almost necessary. You need relationships. I don't mean just boyfriend girlfriend, but I mean friendships as well, community. To move on in life, to get over your selfishness, to lift your curse almost. Well,
and if you look at the titular moving castle, I mean, when Sophie first gets in there, it's a total dump, and but just her being in that environment and being a part of what they call at the end a family. She cleans the castle up, and it just goes from looking awful to looking really just spotless and immaculate.
But this need for relationships, this is something that we've seen in some of Miyazaki's other work. I think back to Spirited Away and the way in which it's the greedy, selfish people who end up swallowing themselves almost.
Yeah.
And that protagonist ends up developing her friendships that she's actually able to progress throughout that setting, similar to the way in which Howl and Sophie together are able to move through their respective curses and come out on the other side as two whole people.
Similar to how the Princess Mononoke regains humanity by meeting humans again instead of living in the forest in her own film. This is definitely a theme. I would definitely bring up as a major theme of Miyazaki is the questioning of individuality. Is it worth it? Because it seems to have a great sacrifice, and I would say that he's arguing that to live in community and to live in love is a better choice than to try to succeed on your own.
And at the same time, it's not some trite having a romance is going to make me better
right.
kind of thing, because it's all about the love that the individual is still putting out there.
Exactly. It's not.
You're not getting fixed by having a girlfriend or having a boyfriend.
And it's because it's not just about them; it's about the entire community of the film.
Right.
They all help each other. Even the Scarecrow, he gets his curse lifted because of his interaction with this community.
Mm-hmm. And I think that war basically, the war themes there are showcasing what happens when, on a more national scale, this just gets blown out of proportion and is completely chaotic.
Yeah,
there isn't the community anymore.
Yeah, I think Miyazaki, he's really he's dealing with themes that have very, very wide-reaching implications, and I think they're themes that you can see echoing throughout all of his films.
That's a good point. And we're going to be returning to that theme of war when we discuss next time on Princess Mononoke. Until then, guys, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you're enjoying Month-a-zaki.
Later, guys.
See ya.
This episode of Critical Hit was brought to you by StoryForge Productions. Your hosts were Matthew Edwards, David Hoffman, and Kyle Keene. It was edited and recorded by Karen Keene with original music by Duncan Kirk Bohannon. For more shows like Critical Hit, visit our website at www.storyforgeproductions.com.